time has brought about many changes in Port Talbot and the Avon Valley. At the furthest end of the valley, over 1,000 feet above sea level, is the village of Abuinvi. Here, as elsewhere in the South Wales valleys of the 19th and 20th centuries, rich seams of coal were discovered deep underground, and, in the midst of this small community and its neighbouring village of Glyncorrwg, the pit heads dominated the skyline, surrounded by the usual assortment of colliery buildings, workshops, offices, sheds, a yard for storing timber, much of the ground covered by railway lines and tramways. The colliery was at the centre of village life, and most of the inhabitants depended on it. The Cape, as it was known, and is still referred to locally, though no one is quite sure why. Does it refer to the Cape of Good Hope, or is there some other reason? The colliery was originally called the Great Western, since the coal mined here provided high-grade steam coal for the Great Western Railway. Later it was renamed the Ocean Navigation, before finally becoming the Avon Colliery. When the material brought to the surface was waste, this was transported by tram up to the top of the mountain and dumped in ever-growing heaps. Finally, the colliery closed in 1969, 91 years after first being sunk, and the buildings mostly fell into ruin, or disappeared altogether, the shafts capped in concrete. The Great Western Hotel is a reminder of the old days. Mining villages often had very large, imposing hotels standing in their main streets. The railway has gone, Abuinvi station now replaced by dense undergrowth. The winding road that once led down to the platform, now a mere outline on the embankment. Glyncorrwg too had its railway, the Rhondda and Swansea Bay line, which ran through the mountain to Treorchy and beyond. The tunnel entrance has vanished beneath the landscaped grass slope. Jersey Road was once full of shops, including the Abuinvi Cooperative Society stores, which continues to run as a community cooperative, where local people can buy their necessities. The Glyncorrwg Workmen's Hall, once paid for by a weekly subscription from the miners' wages, is run today by the council as a social centre, providing a library as well as a venue for other activities, such as the Silver Band. The snooker room is the one part of the building that has been kept in its original form and is much enjoyed by local enthusiasts. And village children play beneath the stained glass window that depicts their heritage. Abuinvi Junior School stood at one time on the side of the mountain until the building became unsafe, and the new school was built on the site of the old dismantled Avon Colliery, more or less where one pithead used to be. The teachers make sure that each new generation of children learn about the past. In years gone by, the local football team, Abuinvi United, used to play up on the recreation ground, on top of the Gethley mountain above Abuinvi. Whenever the ball was accidentally kicked off the pitch, it would have to be fetched from the road far below. Today's team plays on a different field, in a much more sheltered position on the opposite side of the valley. When the team isn't playing a game, the home of Abuinvi United is the Gethley Hotel, where Mervyn Blackmore sits in his usual corner, sipping a pint. Mervyn was a boxer rather than a footballer, and represented Wales in its senior amateur international side against England in 1953. Since the closing of the Avon colliery, the nearest working coal mine is Tower Colliery at Hirwaun, not very far away over the mountains. Indeed, some of the men working at Tower come from these parts, and the coal face is, ironically, deep underground beneath their homes. Tower Colliery is a living reminder of what went on in much of the Avon Valley. Land reclamation. The scars of the past are gradually erased from the valley floor. Like gigantic, unwieldy creatures, these machines bury the evidence of an industrial age under the soil. Glyncorrwg, like Abuinvi, was a mining community with drift mines running into the hillsides, as well as the deep underground shafts. Unlike Abuinvi, Glyncorrwg is a dead end, for the road goes no further. The landscaping stretches from the site of the Glyncorrwg colliery down the valley towards Cymmer, where the Taibbach colliery was situated. St. John's Church in Glyncorrwg is built on the site of the first church, which was reputedly served by the monks of Margam Abbey. Reverend Cyril Lasky greets his parishioners at the south porch as they leave after Sunday morning service. Apart from the old scattered farms, most of the recognisable Glyncorrwg grew up to serve the coal mines and the levels, which were numerous in this area. 3 public houses used to stand in a row, the Queen's Hotel and the Collier's Arms. The Collier's has gone, but the Queen's remains as a private house. And on the other side of the road, the Castle Hotel, now a house as well. The massive old Workman's Hall is now a very popular pub. The south pit of the Glyncorrwg colliery in the 1950s. Looking down the valley towards Glyncorrwg, the land is now restored back to its original state. These are the Cwmavon cottages that survived the flood of 1909, now just another memory of the past, gone forever. But all the land reclamation has not just been a matter of covering over an important period in the valley's history. Something new has emerged, in the shape of the Glyncorrwg ponds, a delightful series of lakes used for fishing. When Cymmer was a small farming community, most of its cottages were situated down by the river. This is the site of an old woolen mill, but only fragments of the stone walls are left to show where it once was. These are some of the long-forgotten people who lived and worked at Gethley Farm in the later years of the 19th century. The farm is still in use today, although the old mill has long been a ruin, standing in a quiet, sheltered position beside the river. 2 of its grindstones left as evidence of its purpose. Nearby, the Gethley cottages were built for the men who worked in the drift mines that ran into the hillside beneath Gethley Farm. These are the oldest surviving buildings of their kind in the valley. Where the river Corrwg comes down one valley and meets the river Abuinvi from the other, This is the original commercial heart of Cymmer. Still resplendent with its tall buildings. One of the most imposing of these is the cooperative store which opened in 1913. The front of the building was, in the first instance, only 2 stories high, and a 3rd floor was added later. It is no longer used as a shop, but has become a private residence. 2 of Cymmer's railway bridges, the tracks long gone. The viaduct of the Rhondda and Swansea Bay Railway, now almost hidden from view by trees, is no more than a pleasant country footpath where the steam trains used to thunder through. The iron viaduct, another relic of the great railway era, was once threatened by demolition, but thankfully it's still standing. This is when the trains still ran through the Maesteg Tunnel. 3 railway companies ran their lines through Cymmer, but when the closures began, soon there was little left to show for it, except for the refreshment rooms. Built in 1886, and maintained as a fine example of railway architecture, the wooden sleepers still in position beneath the platform, the warning notice kept as an intriguing piece of memorabilia. Inside, the refreshment rooms provide the thirsty and hungry visitor with a comfortable bar and a very fine restaurant where the pictures on the walls show the building's long-lost origin. The line of the Maesteg Tunnel is marked by an absence of trees from the mountain slope, and Cymmer Primary School occupies part of the route of the Great Western Railway, as it ran from Bridgend to the terminus at Abuinvi. Cymmer's single-span road bridge was built across the River Avon in 1924, providing improved road access with Aberavon. The passing of the years has weakened the reinforced concrete structure, and the bridge is nowadays restricted to single-lane traffic. The Aberavon of the 1950s was a large village, with a long ribbon of houses leading all the way to Cymmer. But as the houses fell into disrepair, so many of the people were moved out. Although there were plenty of gaps in the terraces, the remaining houses have been modernised. The path of the old South Wales mineral line is clearly visible, and indeed has been adopted as a public right-of-way, connecting this part of the valley with Pontrhydyfen lower down. A view across the valley at this point would have shown the full extent of the Duffryn Rhondda colliery, the largest coal mine in the area with the deepest shafts. This is what it looks like now, after demolition and landscaping. But there is one part of it left standing. The administrative offices, now occupied by Baker's do-it-yourself store, little altered except for the removal of the initials PDAC, Powell Duffryn Associated Collieries. High above, on the steep slope of the mountain, are the coal tips, gradually becoming covered over and absorbed into the landscape. The Duffryn Rhondda colliery may be no more than a memory, but one day the land will probably find other uses. The brick railway viaduct at Pontrhydyfen was constructed in 1898 by the Port Talbot Railway and Dock Company Limited to transport coal from Tonmawr to the docks. It is built on a gradual incline, just visible in the arrangement of the brickwork, and curves slightly along its length. The steam engine in this picture is pulling the empty wagons on their upward journey to Tonmawr. The aqueduct is older, dating from 1825, its purpose being to carry water in a trough to the Oakwood Ironworks, where it powered a big wheel in the foundry. The aqueduct is now used only as a footbridge. The Oakwood Ironworks occupied the site now covered by a grass embankment next to the rugby pitch, and a short distance away, the second rugby field at Lleislyn is where the Oakwood colliery used to be. The houses were all that is left after the colliery closed down. The old railway cutting beside the rock used to carry the line through to Pontrhydyfen station. Hard to imagine now, with little left to show for it. But this is the footing of the signal box. And where the bridge crossed over the lines, this is what has become of the platform. And the ironwork is one of the bridge supports. The original church in Pontrhydyfen was a corrugated iron structure, but this was replaced by a more permanent stone building, although this has now fallen into disuse and the bell remains silent. But the Bethel Chapel nearby, with its unusually large parapet, has a fine interior with scrolled ironwork columns supporting the gallery. It was here where the memorial service for Richard Burton was held in 1984. The old watermill at Aberavon has gone, and the road is a little changed. But the Colliers is a familiar landmark, and so is the Miners' Arms, both reminders of the great coal era. This is an early view of rural Cwmavon before industry descended upon it. And today's most prominent evidence of the past is the mound known as Pen Castell, where an ancient hill fort was situated. Viewed from the Bryn Road, it is possible to see a depression near the top, part of the earthwork defences created by those early inhabitants. The picture of rural tranquility does, however, show the copperworks, and during the 19th century, Cwmavon was filled with many industries: tinplate, iron, brick-making, and coal mining. Houses were built rapidly to accommodate the growing population. Many of them sprawling out in rows across the bottom of the mountain. But eventually the heavy industries had their day, and one by one they closed down or moved elsewhere, leaving ruined factory buildings. These houses occupy the site of the copperworks, and the steep side of the Vole Mountain still bears the marks of a culvert which led up to the tall chimney, or stack, known as the Stack of Vole, a huge structure sitting on top of the highest mountain. It was considered to be a landmark for enemy aircraft during the last war, and was demolished. But the bricks and stones remain in a huge pile overlooking Cwmavon below. Where the Copper House pub is a further clue to the past. One of the few clues, in fact, judging by the way modern housing has obliterated most other signs. Cunard Terrace had a railway line running across it, but now the road runs uninterrupted, and the police station has become a residential home for the elderly. Many of the mountainsides in the Avon Valley are covered in forestry, and one of Cwmavon's present industries is the Western Log Company, which takes local as well as imported timber and turns it into fencing and log cabins. The old Port Talbot dock is a vast expanse of water, which today seems strangely silent. The coal tipplers all gone, except for their bases, and the original lock gate entrance surrounded by tall reeds. But a view of the dock from not so many years ago shows considerable activity at the jetties, and the outline of the old lock is plainly visible in the water. The Second World War brought the Americans to Port Talbot, with a vast quantity of military equipment in readiness for D-Day. And since the old dock reopened in 1999, shipping has returned, with coastal freighters calling regularly at the new civil and marine works to load up with granulated slag material from the steelworks, used by the construction industry in other parts of Great Britain. Harbour House, once the home and office of the harbour master, stands proudly at the water's edge, the oldest building still in use in the town. Dating from 1838, it is now the headquarters of the Port Talbot Sea Cadets. The Customs Office has become the home of the Port Talbot Small Boat Club, with a comfortable bar occupying an interior once used by the customs officers whose job it was to inspect all ships entering the harbour. The Dock Hotel, a grand old building of some prominence, went the same way as so many others, and only the land where it once stood remains. But the dock still has a use for the local young sea cadets of the Training Ship Resource, who use its sheltered waters to perfect their seafaring skills and techniques for the future. Today's Aberavon could hardly be more different from that of the past, with modern buildings and broad pavements, and a futuristic canopy now adorning the High Street Bridge, rather like a new hat placed on top of an old familiar face. In earlier days, before the full-scale redevelopment of the town centre got underway, the bridge led to the tall old buildings and narrow streets that were so typical of the original Aberavon, created in a past age which has gone forever. The causeway used to lead from the top end of High Street up to Springfield Terrace, which now has only one means of vehicle access, at the top of Pentilla Hill. And the causeway, firstly closed to road traffic but maintained as a footpath, was cut in half by the building of the motorway viaduct. And the brick gateposts halfway up, seeming to lead nowhere, were once the entrance to Mountain Infant School. On the other side of the motorway, the causeway continues its upward journey, past Seaview Terrace and up the mountain road. The story of a changed Aberavon is also a tale of lost public houses and hotels. There were once over 50 of them in the town centre alone, and this is just a small glimpse of the many that have passed into oblivion. Those remaining are few and far between. For even the Green Meadow has now closed, although the Craddock Arms survives on what used to be the corner of Pritchard Street and Green Park Street, and the Old Vic is, so to speak, a newcomer on the opposite side of the river. The Eamon Tobin Cafe and Bar in Station Road has decorated its outside walls with the portraits of local personalities to mark the millennium. This part of Station Road has not changed greatly, but Bethany Square has altered beyond recognition, although much of the difference has to do with getting rid of traffic and replacing the road with pavement for everyone's greater convenience. This is the entrance to the market in Water Street. with the new Aberavon Centre nearly ready to replace it. The view from the newly completed Civic Centre suggests a bright future. And the Princess Royal Theatre, officially opened to the public in 1989, is a wonderful venue for a wide variety of stage shows. Here, the youth section of the Port Talbot and District Amateur Operatic Society is performing The Wizard of Oz to the delight of a local audience. The Aquadome at the Avon Lido is an exciting new variation on the idea of the old swimming pool, complete with giant spaceship, Inca temple, a wave machine, and water jet fountains, providing fun for people of all ages. Aberavon Beach, with its fine long stretch of golden sand, has drawn crowds of people for decades, and these scenes from a glorious summer in the 1980s show beach races, and competitive canoeing, culminating in the excitement of a human chariot race, cheered on by hundreds of spectators. There has been a lifeboat in Port Talbot since 1966, a D-class inshore inflatable lifeboat, but the tractor and trailer launch, which served for over 30 years, has been replaced since the opening of the new lifeboat station in 1988. With a quicker response provided by Land Rover. The lifeboat crew relies on over 20 willing and enthusiastic local volunteers, and the lifeboat covers a wide area between the Kenfig and Leith rivers, including, occasionally, emergencies in the Port Talbot dock. Taibbach translates from Welsh as small houses, and although quite a few of the old long rows have been demolished, the character of the village remains true to its origin, with this distinctive style of architecture. On the opposite side of the river, situated beside St. Theodore's Church, is the Port Talbot Memorial Park, established in 1925 to remember those who had fallen in the Great War. And every year an armistice service is held for the men of Port Talbot and the surrounding district who died in the 2 World Wars. The school that was once upon a time situated on Old Road in Baglan is now a church. The new church of St. Baglan, replacing the old National School and the original St. Baglan's church that had fallen into disuse and become a ruin. In the days when the building was still a school and the bell rang to bring the children to their desks, the house alongside was occupied by the headmistress. There is still evidence of Baglan's rural beginning, for the building which stands this side of St. Catherine's Church is Pentwyn Farm, which is in use today and occupied by the Williams family, who have farmed the area for many years. The old winding road that leads out of Baglan in the direction of Britton Ferry retains its ancient milestone by the junction with Thorney Road, its inscription now barely legible. A later type of milestone, cast in iron, stands beside Tollgate Road in Margam. This is the original road into Port Talbot from Pyle, and nearby was the toll house, where the toll-keeper collected all dues. It has gone now, but this is where it used to be, at the junction between Morver Road and Tollgate Road. The name Tollgate is still referred to on local shops. High up on Margam Mountain is the remains of a wartime radar station, the rusting ironwork which used to support the radar apparatus still attached to the flat concrete roof. This was here long before the Abbey steelworks, when Margam moors were a wide stretch of desolate marshland. But then, in 1947, the building of the new Abbey works got underway. With the draining of the moors. And the emergence of a giant new factory. This was to become a new concept in steelmaking, an integrated works, where the raw materials used for the production of steel, consisting of iron ore, coke and limestone, could go into the blast furnaces at one end and coils of steel strip come out at the other. It would be called the Steel Company of Wales and was to become a triumph for Welsh industry and local employment. The work would be heavy and unceasing, in temperatures that were hard for the men to bear. Molten iron poured from the blast furnaces into huge ladles to be taken to the steel-making furnaces. Molten steel run into ingots. which would be transferred to the hot rolling mill to be turned into long strips of thin steel. This was the routine, each day and each night, week after week, month after month, year after year, for an expanding post-war economy that needed every bit of steel that the works could produce. Steel continues to roll off the production line, although the method has changed a little, and fewer people work at Port Talbot to make a greater amount of finished steel. The remaining acres of moorland meet the boundary of the works, where cattle graze in the shadow of the coke ovens and coal washery. Margam Castle was once one of the most splendid mansions in South Wales, built by the Talbot family in the early 1830s. Its days of extravagance ended when the estate was sold during the last war, and following years of neglect, the house was destroyed by fire in 1977. Since then, it has been carefully restored by the local authority, which owns Margam Park, and has every right to be considered one of the finest Gothic houses in this part of Wales. The Orangery, an equally magnificent building, is still used to hold special functions, and on this occasion it is the venue for a wedding, with all the splendour of the early days, when the Talbots were still in residence. Each weekend, sailing enthusiasts in their dinghies set course across the Steel Company's reservoir at Margam and enjoy an afternoon's racing. These waters have been here since the building of the Abbey Works in the late 1940s, and will remain here undoubtedly as part of the town for many years to come.